Well, hello everyone and good evening. My name is Tulba and I think you'll recognise me from the previous Agbero live webinars, but I'm the Associate Director of Community Wealth Building, and you can see that that I'm not Michael Hamilton, but I've stepped in for Michael because he's currently out of the country. So I'm going to be hosting this evening's session and I'm delighted to have a range of very interesting speakers and practitioners and experts who are going to share their knowledge and experience with us. Just to give you a bit of context in terms of where we are, if you recall, we had 5 webinars up to now, and so this is the last, and we're going to be focusing on physical asset ownership. So really about what it takes to own, control, and sustainably manage your community building and assets. So we're going to get into some very interesting topics and conversations with our speakers this evening. And so in terms of just running through the programme, once I've done the gentle introduction and context, I'm going to invite our speakers to introduce themselves one at a time. And then we're going to have a conversation with Yvonne and Paloma, who's going to really just explore a bit about the process of securing an asset, thinking about the design, sustainable design in terms of buildings, and really think about it in the context of community wealth building. And then I'm going to be inviting Euphrasia to talk about their work up in Stockton-on-Tees, up in the northeast, and how they've transformed a pub into a valuable community asset. And then I'm going to get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty and some details really around sort of licenses, leases, renting, community assets, and really what some of the benefits and disbenefits might be. And then I'm going to invite Karl Murray, who's an Associate Director for Ubele, and who some of you will know, who's led on the assessments that some of you have been involved in, but also Karl was leading on the writing of the Place to Call Home 2.0 report. So we're going to have a bit of a conversation with Karl about what are some of the key themes that are appearing from the assessments to date. And then I've just got a few little announcements and tying up at the end, and maybe we just have a little bit of a conversation around the kind of political context and climate of where we're in, and maybe what some of the opportunities might be for us around assets and ownership going forward under the current government. And so I'm delighted to introduce our speakers for this evening. We've got Yvonne, and then Paloma will be introducing themselves, and then Euphrasia. So Yvonne, if you'd like to say a few words about yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm delighted to be here. I'm Yvonne Field. I'm the CEO and founder of the Ubele initiative. And yeah, really interested to share our experience of Walls Lane. And I'm sure you've heard from colleagues over the last few weeks and the work that you're involved in with us. We develop community spaces, leaders, and community enterprise to try and really help our communities become more sustainable. So that's me for now.
And Paloma, over to you.
Hello. Gosh, that's my voice. Hello, everybody. I'm Paloma Gormley. I'm one of the co-directors of an organisation called Material Cultures. We work to kind of integrate really low carbon materials and technology into new buildings. So kind of learning from the past and applying it to the future, and trying to kind of change the relationship that our built environment has to the climate. Up until now, it's been very destructive, but we think that can change.
Thank you, Paloma. And then Euphrasia.
Hello, everyone. My name is Euphrasia Makaure. I'm the founder of One Community Link in a charity in Stockton-on-Tees, the northeast of England. I'm very happy to be with you, and I'm very grateful for the work or the workshops that have been happening through Ubele for the past, I think, 5 or 4 weeks. We run a charity and we work with asylum seekers, refugees, and migrants, and we support them in different aspects: universal credits, hate crime, racism, ESO classes, a number of complex issues in terms of migration as well. So I'm happy to be with you.
Thank you, Euphrasia. And I remember we met back in, I think, February when we did the roadshow. It was wonderful to see you and meet some of the team. And then right on cue, Karl Murray props up on my screen. Really good to see you. Karl, could you say a few words about yourself, and then from there, I'll be handing over to Yvonne and Paloma. So Karl, welcome.
Thank you, Phil. Karl Murray, for those who don't know me, and hopefully, I'm not sure who's online, but I hope most of you do. And not much by way of introduction. Associate Director, Research and Evaluation of the Ubele Initiative, and involved on a number of different projects across the region. So you may see me pop up here and there with different ads on, like
Thanks,
a bad
Karl.
penny.
Thanks, Karl. I look forward to having a conversation later on about synopsis of where you are with the assessments and what's starting to come through. So yes, very happy to have you all here, and I'm going to hand over to Yvonne and Paloma, who's going to talk us through, I suppose, some of the background and the history, and then where we are currently in terms of the design and build and future sustainability of Wolves Lane, the home of Ubele. So Yvonne, over to you.
Thank you, Phil. So the story of Wolves Lane and how we landed there and what we've been doing. So some people may know that Ubele has been campaigning around community space in particular and land since we began, really, doing that in conjunction with a London-based organisation called Just Space. Just Space, really important collection of community-based organisations, up to 100 organisations pan-London, campaigning against and putting alternative community-based proposals to the London plan. You know, when we see these developments in our communities, we think, oh, sometimes we can think, where did that come from? Could we just see tower blocks and things going up? But actually, it's part, certainly in London, of a 25-year planning process of the Mayor of London. And Just Space really does a community gathering and a community voice exercise as a sort of challenge to the London plan. So Ubele was involved in that back from 2014-15. And through that work and those campaigning, we met somebody, a really nice guy called Rob Logan, who invited me to Wolves Lane. And I have to say, quite shamefully, I didn't know it existed, even though it was in my backyard. I hadn't been in Tottenham for very long, actually. I'm a South Londoner by origin, but didn't know that Wolves Lane was there, and was so surprised because it is a 3.5-acre food growing space with allotments and glass houses, palm house, cactus house, cafe, and so on. It's a bit of a rugged Kew Garden in Haringey in Wood Green. So I was invited to host conversations around food growing and space. That was back in 2017. And ultimately we were asked in late 2017, 2018, if we would like to join the consortium of organisations who were running Wolves Lane at the time. And that's how we landed there. We moved in January 2018 and really haven't looked back since. I mentioned the consortium. So back then there were, I think, 4 or 5 organisations involved in developing the strategy for Wolves Lane. And as you know, we were all volunteers. It was a lot of work. It still continues to be a lot of work, but really to put our hearts and souls into thinking about what kind of space this could be, given the uniqueness of it. And obviously food growing is central to what we do. However, Ubele were not natural food growers. Our mission is around community sustainability, community asset development. So we got involved to ensure that we rebuild and redevelop a site that's really sustainable. Leadership development is also part of our mission, and also enterprise. So we brought those elements to the consortium and to Wolves Lane. In terms of funding all of what we're doing, I mean, we've just, and Paloma will talk more about the actual build and kind of how we got into that. But in 2018, early 19, we kind of began to make plans to redevelop the site. At the back of the glass houses, and I think there were 8 glass houses, we had a lot of porta cabins that had holes in the ceilings and all sorts of things. The ones that Ubele had, the 2, were the warmest on the site. It is a working outdoor site, ostensibly. So in the winter, it gets very cold. In the summer, it's stunning in the summer, actually. So we decided we wanted to redevelop the site, build new buildings. We started fundraising, and the first funding that we got was from the Greater London Authority, the Mayor's Authority, under their Good Growth programme they had for developing community assets and community buildings. So we were successful. And then we put into the lottery, because the lottery not only does revenue, but it also does capital building funds or funds for buildings. And we were successful there. However, COVID hit in 2020. As you will know, not only did funding stop coming through, it was all emergency funding, long-term funding initiatives were put on hold. But also after COVID, the cost of building had gone up probably about 20%. That was also because of leaving the EU as well. There was all sorts of factors happening that meant that we didn't have enough for the building costs. The 3 buildings are a community hub, our offices, classroom, and outside kitchen, and then a large space for food. And Paloma, again, will tell you more about that. But we found ourselves considerably short. Fortunately, the lottery put some more money in. And we also got some more money from Good Growth Fund. We got a small amount from cloth workers as well, because they do give for capital build. And although we are almost near reoccupation of the site, the new site, the 3 buildings at the back, we're still a bit short. I think we're going to need to raise about another 170,000 for the landscaping. However, number one, I would invite you to come and visit us as Wolves Lane. We are a real, you know, it's a magnificent space. Everybody who comes there just loves it, falls in love with it because of the connection with nature and with food and with people and communities. We know that now that we're near the end of the build, and we've got to now obviously keep raising money, because we've got to make sure that we can sustain the buildings in terms of financial sustainability. However, we've got some great support around that, what the plans are and so on and so forth. The consortium is, at the moment, is Ubele and Organic Lee, the River Lee, L-E-A. They're the growers. They were there first. They were the ones that the council first spoke to back in, I think, 2016 about the site. So ourselves and Organic Lee, we're consortium members and co-owners. We've got a 25-year lease of the site. Yeah, I don't know if you want me to say anything more, Phil, about Wolves Lane as it is at the moment and what the journey we've been through. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, we can pick up, I think, in terms of sustainability and really, I suppose, you know, when you enter these things, you don't know what you don't know. And really what were some of the things that we've learned over the last year, last 3-4 years since we've sort of embarked with fundraising. So I think we can certainly pick that up. But I'm very keen to hear from Paloma, because I know the work that you do at Material Cultures. I'm actually quite interested to know where the name comes from. So if you could also explain to us where the name comes from. But, you know, the work that you do as an agency, and I know you do research and everything else, but it just be, if you could describe a little bit more about what you do as an organisation. I know you've got some slides that you want to share, which are really picture paints 1,000 words. And so Yvonne has said, you know, Wolves Lane is fantastic. It absolutely is fantastic. And I know Paloma's got some drawings to share, and I don't know if they include any more recent photographs.
There's a few, yeah, there's a couple in there. Should I share now and then?
Absolutely, over to you, Paloma.
Amazing. Let's go full screen. Yeah, so to just explain a little bit about who we are and what we do. As Phil said, we kind of work across a number of different outputs, I guess. One of those is design, so we design buildings, and another kind of increasingly important one for us is around learning. So we work with institutions to kind of run programs on degree programs, but we also work outside that, and we try and invite people onto our building sites and run structured courses that are really quite direct and hands-on, but also contain that kind of theoretical element and underpinning. We also carry out research, so looking at a kind of strategic level, and that research is generally kind of tying the impact on landscapes to the things that we build. So all the materials that we build with come from somewhere. and generally, obviously, they come from landscapes, be that a mine, be it a forest, be it a field, and where those materials come from are also kind of a site, the building site in a way. So we're interested in the impact in those places. So every time you build something, what's happening from the place that materials are coming from, and effectively by working with bio-based or plant-based materials, you can kind of change the carbon story. So rather than having buildings that cost huge amounts of carbon to build because you're building with concrete, etc., concrete.
Oh, is it me? But has Paloma frozen?
And then if you're careful about where those plants come from, that can get even better. But this is kind of harking back to, I guess, the ways that we used to build things, in that, you know, we used to make buildings out of thatch and cob and these kind of historic materials. But yeah, to kind of bring that approach to somewhere like Wolves Lane, this idea of kind of very simple construction systems. This building is made with hemp and lime, for example, to make buildings that are very readable and that are kind of easy to construct and deconstruct and adapt along the lifespan. So we're really excited to get involved with the project at Wolves Lane and to be working alongside Ubele and Organically on kind of, yeah, imagining the future of this place and also what that could be as a process. So yeah, not just kind of trying to make great buildings, but trying to think about how that journey could be one in which we all kind of learn and grow and share skills and knowledge. So applying those kind of principles of sustainability across all different kind of elements of the project, from financial to social to environmental. This is a kind of sketch, and you can see some pictures of what the site looked like when Yvonne and the team first arrived there. So lots of polytunnels here that were kind of falling down and lost their roofs. Actually, porta cabins that again had holes in the roof, lots of them. So this whole kind of area of the site, we thought it made sense to kind of rethink essentially and think about how we could plug in the needs of the different organisations on the site into a kind of set of new buildings. So we did a lot of sessions of kind of co-design and developing the brief and setting out the principles and developing the design essentially, and came up with this kind of proposal or plan where we'd have a community hall building for all the public events. We'd have then a kind of more back of house courtyard, which would have classrooms in it, but also, because it's a food growing site, all the kind of spaces for processing and distributing the food, and then the offices also. So there's a bit of a kind of front of house, the north here, and then back of house here, and the buildings kind of helping to structure how public move through the space. And then a lot of kind of spatial planning, so distilling the needs that Ubele and other site users had into, okay, we need this number of square meters for this use, we need this number of square meters for that, and then developing a kind of site plan from that, and kind of thinking about the scale of the buildings, really coming back to the materials in terms of what we could build with, working with materials like timber and other kind of low carbon regenerative materials, but thinking about also about kind of how the place would feel, and how to bring kind of depth of character and a richness through from the way that the buildings were made. As I said, working with timber, but yeah, partly because it's low carbon and you can grow it locally, but also because it's kind of easy to work with. So there's a ability to kind of share skills through the making. And then the building's insulated with straw, so it kind of follows that agricultural narrative. We're in an agricultural space, and we can work with agricultural materials and kind of waste, and also materials like straw that we can source very locally. So there was a program of skills workshops, as I said, so through the construction, we invited people to kind of come and join and learn how to build with these materials, so that really that kind of dissemination of skills into the kind of wider community, but I think importantly also to people that are using the site every day. So, you know, if something needs fixing or wants changing, those skills and that knowledge is held by the people who have governance and ownership over the buildings. And that's I think a really big shift, because we're so used to kind of buildings being this kind of, well, yeah, day to day, just not feeling like we can touch or engage with our buildings, or don't know how to mend them, and really wanting to kind of change that. And I think that's actually something that these materials allow you to do. So this is the buildings going up, and the insulation going in, and people being involved in that process, and all the insulation's in, and then we had some internal walls, and they were made with these adobe bricks, which came from just outside London, so they're not fired, low carbon. And there's a kind of further phase to the project which would deliver this building at the end, but kind of showing a view of how the courtyard might end up with the landscaping. And it felt really important. You can see it now. This is why it needs the plants. That inside-outside relationship. So we have some spaces that are semi kind of indoor-outdoor. This is an unheated kind of external kitchen, really blurring that relationship between kind of what's garden and what's inside space. And yeah, the plants being kind of as important, I guess, to the overall design and what happens. But I think, yeah, very genuinely the kind of core narrative through the whole project has been one of kind of learning and sharing, and that process is now continuing at a site called Pasta Gardens down the road, where we've been working with Black Roots, the growers organisation that was established by Ubele, to kind of design and develop a kind of prototypical housing system, and really build on this kind of process that we've started at Wolves Lane, and take it further. That's an aerial view, and in not too long we'll be able to show you the kind of photographic version of this, because they're not far off. I'll stop there, but I may have missed things, so let me know if there's anything I didn't cover.
Paloma. That's absolutely fascinating, and I know this because I've been involved in sort of countless meetings talking about straw bales and lime water and all sorts of things. So and I actually haven't been up Wolves Lane for a while, so I look forward to going and seeing it very, very soon. But Yvonne, I just want to ask you a question. I mean, what was the thinking behind actually wanting to do this along kind of environmental lines? Because I don't know, but sort of it sounds a bit more expensive than sort of just, you know, getting something swanky and sort of, I don't know, sort of constructed and sort of, you know, digging up loads of stuff, cutting it off and tipping it somewhere else and just putting in something new. I mean, what was the thinking behind wanting to work with not only Material Cultures but also Studio Gill and the contractors that we also use? And also, you mentioned also some around training and skills. I mean, again, the think around community wealth building and you know, using local contractors and supply chain. I mean, what was the thinking there? If you could open up there.
Yeah, no, sure, Phil. So, I mean, to be really honest, I hadn't really thought. I hadn't thought, and Ubele hadn't really thought at the beginning about the nature of the build. We just knew that we were going to do a development. I think it was being introduced to both Paloma and Studio Gill, Pedro Gill, that made us begin to think about, well, you know, the whole issue of sustainability, given also the kind of site that we've got, but also that we're in an urban area. And often these kind of buildings are in, you know, rural or peri-urban areas. Black and racially minoritized communities don't often get an opportunity to kind of have these new but old kind of buildings that use, you know, traditional techniques, even though we may come from communities where they've been used for thousands of years. Also because of the, you know, the kind of chronic health conditions that some members of our communities have, like asthma, for example. The fact that we've used, I mean, almost 0% of plaster, for example, and that we're actually creating environments which are, you know, much more beneficial to our health. It was really, really appealing. Some of the things that we were really clear about wanting to do, because of what we noticed as a lack of opportunity for our communities to be involved in building, designing and creating buildings, was to ensure that the pipeline and supply chain of contractors and people that we were going to use to design and build the buildings were from our communities. And that was a particular decision that we made. I mean, it was kind of, you know, there were some hard conversations about that. But in the redevelopment and redesign of our communities, particularly in the urban areas, we often aren't there as contractors and getting the work and being paid to do the work. We're often the so-called beneficiaries or recipients of these new designs. Also, it was important to involve young people from our communities to think about how you know, what the centre would look like, what they would like to see there, and how that, you know, how they would get involved in the future of that. So it was really important to have the next generation involved. But certainly there were very strategic decisions about, you know, the architects that we use, then about the design, and also the pipeline of people involved in building that. And it meant also that we were skills developing, because actually some of the people who've been involved, who were introduced to training opportunities, and then have been actively and proactively involved in building, you know, the straw bales and the clay plastering and so on. They've been, you know, they've really been hooked into this and actually can use those skills, which are actually, there is a need for those skills, so there's a shortage of those skills. So it means they can go on afterwards to also look for other employment opportunities, using those skills that they've learned from site. So I think all round it was a bit of a win-win. It was quite unique. It has been quite unique, but I think it does also open up a space for conversation within our communities about sustainable building and what that means and the benefits for our communities.
And I mean, and just on that, and Paloma, I suppose from a slightly more strategic perspective, we talk about, you know, sustainable building from our communities. I mean, you know, we talk about climate crisis, you know, without sort of getting too dramatic about it, but also, you know, people talk about global majority, global south, you know, there are, you know, our communities around the world are also disproportionately impacted by climate change. So I suppose the question there is, I suppose I'm going to ask, well, why is that important? But I think I sort of answered that. But is there a kind of a local perspective around the extraction of stuff from the ground, and then also how that impacts more globally in terms of carbon and this kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the construction industry is just absolutely one of the worst offenders in terms of producing that carbon and therefore that climate impact. So it produces 40%, the construction industry, 40% of carbon globally. So
40%?
40%.
Wow.
So it's a massive player, if not the major player, and it's very little acknowledged that, you know, flying gets a terrible rap, but making buildings has kind of gone under the radar for a really long time. But it's and the exciting thing is it's the thing that we have, in a way, the most ability to change, to transform. So we can turn the construction industry from being the worst offender to helping through this really simple thing of putting plants in buildings, putting straw, putting hemp, you're using the most proven carbon storage technology, which is plants taking carbon out of the atmosphere as they grow, to make your buildings. Rather, you know, they're inventing all kinds of ridiculous tech to do it, and none of it necessarily works. But we know that plants can do that, and we know that, you know, we've done research to show that if you were to build all the housing that we're about to build over the next 10 years out of bio-based materials and plants, the carbon sequestered would be extraordinary and really meaningful, versus pumping a load more out, increasing temperatures globally and causing a lot more damage. So every building that we can change, that changes the culture. So yeah, it's important.
Thank you, Paloma, and thank you, Yvonne. I obviously still want to have you and keep you online so that we can have a bit of a conversation later on. There might be some questions for you. So if you can both sit tight for the next 30 minutes or so. And I would like to bring in our next speaker, Euphrasia, who's going to talk about the wonderful work they're doing up in the northeast in Stockton-on-Tees. And particularly because we've gone from a kind of a construction project, a new build, to a refurbishment of what used to be a pub. Is that correct, Euphrasia? Over to you.
Yes, please. Can you see my screen?
Yes, if you can load your screen. Yep. You want to run the presentation now?
Yeah, or unless if you want me to
That's good. And then
okay.
do you want to go on to presentation view, or you're going to use it like this?
Yeah, I'm gonna use it like this.
Okay.
So our pub is called Rhema House. It's in Stockton-on-Tees, northeast of England. Where our pub is one of the most deprived wards, very poor. I think in terms of rating, it's almost number 76. In terms of crime, I think there's high crime. And I think according to
Is it me, or has Euphrasia frozen?
I think Euphrasia's frozen.
Okay. We had a little bit of a glitch earlier with Paloma, but hopefully Euphrasia will come back to us. Which is just a shame because just starting to get going. Hello, Euphrasia, can you hear us? And there, Euphrasia has gone. Well, there we go. Well, the wonders of modern technology. So I think whilst our tech team are in the background are frantically trying to find out where Euphrasia's gone, I'm going to probably, unless there are any specific questions, do we have any questions actually for Paloma and Yvonne? Really about, how we structured the Wallstone Consortium, the fundraising, or anything specific around the materials and the design of the construction. So if you've got any questions in the chat, well, if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat. I see Claude has bigged this up, saying it's a wonderful, Wallstone is a great blueprint for community food growing project that should and could be developed in other large urban cities for BME communities. I absolutely agree. But if there are no questions from the audience at the moment in the chat, I'm going to stand Karl by, or in fact, actually, no, what I think I'll use this as an opportunity actually to start really just talking a bit about what I wanted to discuss, which is really the difference and the distinction. We talk about things like leases, ownership, renting, community asset transfer, and I just wanted to kind of just run through some of the benefits and perhaps some of the differences and features of both. And if people want me to pull together a brief paper on this, I'm more than happy to do this. But one of the things that we did with the cohorts, as we were inviting them to express an interest to join, is that we wanted to know whether organisations were renting space, so from a local authority, from a private landlord, whether you had a lease and the duration of the lease, or whether you had ownership of the asset. And actually, I think about 10% of the Agbero responses. So I think we had 132 responses, and I think 11 or 12 organisations said that they actually owned the building outright. And then another proportion, another group actually had significantly long leases. So we know that there are organisations out there that either own the buildings or have control over them, and so that's one form of ownership. And ultimately, there are benefits to that in terms of control, being able to raise finance against the land that you've got. And you're free to go about your own business, and if you own the asset outright, you can do that in perpetuity, for forever. Obviously, if you have a very long lease, and Ubele or the Wolves Lane Consortium has a 25-year lease with the local authority, at some point there's going to be a potential conversation about an extension, to what duration, what that might look like. And other types of arrangements, and this has really come through in the conversations around, is for some organisations, actually hiring spaces has been really important to them and part of their business model, especially very early on, whilst they're testing their business models, so they're establishing, they're getting going. They might be able to be generating income as well as a result of having to hire space. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think part of the issue with space hire is that the cost, and we know that the private hire of spaces for community and particularly cultural and creative organisations in the last 5 years has really gone through the roof, particularly in some of the urban centres of our cities, where they've become quite trendy and gentrified. So actually, organisations who are hiring on sort of 6 months, 12 months sort of arrangements tend to find themselves in difficulty because the landlords are pushing up the rents. And so that's been a bit of a challenge. But of course, the other side is that you've got the flexibility of being able to use and hire space as you are busier, because you've got more income coming in to hire more space and so on and so forth. But then there comes perhaps a tipping point, a transition, where you think, actually, a lease might be better for us. And again, it depends on the duration of the lease that you think might be best. It could be a 3 to 5 year lease. In some instances, I'm aware, and some of you might be aware, that organisations have been put onto a sort of a tenancy at will, which again might work for you. Typically a 12-month arrangement, but there are, the uncertainties that you'll have with that. So there are some benefits and disbenefits of that tenancy and will process. And as I said, some organisations have just been forced onto just annualised tenancy at wills, and they run on for 3, 5, 6, 7 years, which really, in terms of strategic planning and future planning and business planning, is really not a good position for organisations to be in, because you just don't have that certainty of being able to fundraise confidently. And funders will say, well, actually, can you have a 3-year lease or a 5-year lease, because we want to ensure that we are going to get the social value, the benefit from our funding into your organisation. And then there's a point where actually a lease becomes quite important, particularly if you want to undertake a capital project. So with Wolves Lane, we've raised over £3 million. So we needed a sufficiently long lease to be able to ensure that we can deliver the impact that we want to over time, and for the funders to also be confident that we can do that. And leases, some of the features of the leases are very important, because that gives you kind of exclusive possession. So if you imagine that red line that runs around the building or the land, essentially you have possession and control of that. But then, of course, you are then responsible for the bills and the maintenance. Some of you may be familiar with the acronym FRI, fully repairing and insuring leases. So actually, you'll be taking on a lot of the liabilities that comes with managing the building. So we talk about assets, but some work needs to be done before you enter particularly into a long lease with a building, to understand, actually, is it a liability? Do you need a structural survey? Do you need a building survey, just to ensure that the roof isn't going to fall in, because fundamentally you're going to be responsible for it. And then you've got the asset transfer model, which either you're in a position to own and buy the asset outright, or a local authority will provide you with a community asset transfer. And it sounds like it could be an amazing thing, and it can be, but in some cases the duration of the asset the lease transferred to you isn't particularly long. It could be 3, 5 years or 10 years. And actually, in some cases, they might have lots of management clauses and SLAs put into those community asset transfers, those CATs. So actually, you don't have that control that you'd want, because you've got essentially the landlord, in this case, the local authority, saying, yes, of course, you can have this below market consideration, you can have a lease on it, but we would like X, Y, and Z. So there's a bit of a negotiation that you need to get into with local authorities to do that. And that's actually one of the things that we can support you with. I think one of my colleagues will hopefully have posted a link to a resource called My Community, which is a useful asset resource on community assets and community asset transfer, and that's been put together by a range of organisations, but also including locality, who I believe are still managing it. But if people want, I'm more than happy to prepare a paper that just talks about, you know, the difference between sort of benefits, pros and cons of licenses, of hiring, of leases and the different types of leases, and then sort of ownership outright of what that entails, and then community asset transfer. So if people want, just put it in the chat, and I'm more than happy to pull that together. And absolutely right on cue, Euphrasia, welcome back. I was just talking about leases and licenses and lots of stuff that really gets me excited. But what's really gets me excited is hearing the wonderful story that you're doing up in the Northeast. So in the moment when you can get your slide up and running, it'd be really good to see the presentation, because I know that you've gone on an incredible journey, both as an activist and an entrepreneur, but also with your community. So if you could take about 10 minutes or so, and then I'm going to bring Karl in after you, just for a little bit of a synopsis and a wrap up on where we are with the assessments and what's coming through, and then hopefully we should have a few minutes at the end for opening up for a bit of a conversation and any questions from the audience. So Euphrasia, over to you.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so sorry for the for the Wi-Fi. So I was talking about we bought Rhema House, this old pub. It used to be called Cricketers Club. So we bought it outright, but if you look at the pictures, it was in a very old condition. Just kind of showing the old photos. So this is the state it was when we bought it. I think the building of Rhema House has been a challenging journey and also a very interesting journey. This is me, one of the times where renovation. Then this is Rhema House now. I think this is the inside of Rhema House. This is our overflow. I think around 30 people can go into the overflow. This is the main hall. Almost about 100 people can go into the main hall. Then this is, now we are serving hot food into the main hall. This is one of the shows that we did with Kehinde. We had a conversation with Kehinde Andrews in 2023. And this is one of the activists from Sudan. So let me, before I continue to show you pictures, let me just talk about how we managed to renovate Rhema House. The work of Rhema House was all because of a number of people, partners and service users. I've learned during this journey that everyone in your life is very, very crucial, because the first people who initiated to begin to demolish the Rhema House were people who had no English. They were Latin Americans. And one word that I knew that they spoke about was esposo. And then they began to show signs of demolition. So when they began to say that I could join the words, they were asking me to tell my husband that we can demolish this building and we know how to build, and give us the chance. So I managed to get all the words through using Spanish and using Google. So I told my husband that these people want to demolish this building, and they know how to do it. So a number of service users come together and they begin to demolish. There were lots of areas that needed to be demolished. So they begin to work around. And when the work was all clear, then we managed to have an engineer who said, we can help you. One thing that also really helped us, we had partners like All in Youth, Masha Garrett. One thing that I've learned as well, when you are working in the community, make sure you don't work with people only from your own country. Make sure you work with everybody. That diversity is very crucial. So as we began to demolish, when we sat down with our partners, we managed to find funding. So because this building was privately bought, but for us to renovate, it was supposed to give a lease. So we managed to give the lease for 25 years, the lease. So we managed to get some funding from Sports England to renovate through the help of our partners and service users. So as the main challenge that we faced was getting builders to come and renovate the building. As soon as they come and see the ethnic minorities, they were really not interested. But because the service users has managed to clear the whole land inside, so one of the engineers said, you know what, I realize you have been struggling to find a builder or a construction company, so I'm going to help you. So that electric engineer took his construction company and his workers and began to help us to renovate the building. Along the way, we faced so many struggles. And I think Yvonne spoke about COVID. And it was 2016 that when you bought the building. So 2019, we had issues with COVID, obviously the increase in materials, increase in a number of things. So it means our funding was not enough. We had to learn how to do some of the work. As service users, we had to train lots of people how to begin to do some of the work so that at least our funding will be enough. Because we didn't get enough funding, we only get 150,000, I think around 170,000. But we were so determined to finish this work. So with the help of partners and service users, we continued with the work until we finished the hall. This is one of our main halls where we do hot meals, I think fitness classes. This is our hall where we do dances. You can see youngsters dancing and our service users, different cultures really. So if I look at the benefits of this, renovating this building, I don't regret this work. And I'm looking forward to get support again. We have got another land that we need to increase our capacity because we work with refugee, migrant, asylum seekers, and we realize that we need more space. And also the reason why we looked for a place, you know, we are from different cultures, but if we come to UK, sometimes you go to these pubs, the type of food that they eat, it doesn't really suit ourselves. So now we have a center where we can really cook our own food and eat our own food, which is very important. And it's also a safe space whereby people can speak about their trauma when they've been going through asylum journey. So we are very happy in terms of getting a safe space for Black and Caribbean ethnic minorities to really have our own food. Sometimes we speak our own language. You are very free, whereby we don't have to be worried who is listening to us. So in terms of the building that we have got a project that is going to go on in terms of like 5 years, working on racism and anti-racism, and one-to-one support, especially investing in our own people, that they fully equipped to challenge racism and hate crime in workplaces, wherever they are. So we are looking forward because we have got a fixed space. It means we can really help lots of people and be able to get all the statistics. And recently, because of the harsh economic, I think, migration policies, we have seen that so many migrants do not have space. They are becoming homeless. Some of them were students. Some of them came with care visas. But because of the policies, we see most of them coming to seek asylum. And sometimes they have no accommodation at all. So it is our desire that we begin to help them in terms of expanding our land and also even having accommodation, like emergency accommodation, to support our own community. Areas of development, I talked about the land, the massive car park land that we have at the moment for sports and community activities. We also have to want to build emergency temporary accommodation flats for women, children, families above the wall to reduce the amount of time spent trying to find emergency accommodation for people in crisis or who have no recourse to public funds. Our organization is Black-led, 100% Black-led, and we have lived experience in terms of helping our people. Sometimes someone can call me 11 o'clock. I understand because I've been through that journey. So I can answer your phone, I can help, I can really understand where you're going. So that's why we are looking forward to help more and to become OISC registered. It means we can provide legal advice. So I'm very grateful for the beneficiaries who get involved and the partners like All in Youth, MVDA is another agent that really helped us as well. So, and also being part of Ubele and the workshops and the assessment is very helpful. I don't know if I leave any other question. Any other way.
That's very good and wonderful, Euphrasia. And I know that if you had more time, you'd be able to talk a lot more about the work that you're doing with your service users and beneficiaries. But I'm also mindful of time, and I see that you bigged up Ubele and the assessment process. So I'm going to use that as an opportunity to sort of tee Karl up to get ready. But I see there's been lots of questions coming into the chat and lots of comments. So hopefully we can mop up some of those at the end. But if not, we're going to write some responses and we'll put them on the resource anyway. We'll be developing a microsite, so you'll be able to access all of these videos and all of the questions and any additional resources that we create. And I think what I'd like to do is, Euphrasia, if you could think of one top tip that you could share right at the very end, and similarly Yvonne and Paloma, one top tip, what's one thing that you've learned sort of through this process? So I'm going to give you a few minutes to think about it. But Euphrasia was kind enough to say thanks to the work of Ubele and particularly Agbero and the assessments. And Karl Murray's been leading the assessments for us. So Karl, I want to hand over to you to sort of in about 5 minutes or so to do a bit of a synopsis, sort of roundup of what's starting to come through, sort of what's the flavour of what you're seeing out there.
Okay, thanks. So can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, I'm just trying to share my screen, but I'm not allowed to. So there you go, Chris. If you could open me up, that would be useful. I'm going to quickly go through some key points. One of the main aim underpinning the approach around the Agbero support program was the baseline assessment with organizations, and that entailed an introduction to the assessment tool, and following that assessment, where you see baseline assessment, organizations, so I'm just getting this floater out of the way. Organizations conducted their own self-assessments as to where they are, based around certain key criteria, the 6 domains that we were working with, and some sub areas against that. And then that was followed up by a phase 2 one-to-one conversation with myself to go through some of their self-assessment area and to begin to look at prioritizing what would be the key area that they would welcome the consultancy and the workshops and or the webinars that they could benefit from. They will then move on to the implementation phase, which is phase 3. So I'm going to leave that for the moment because we're not there yet. But I'll just take you up to where we've got to. Now, why is this frozen? Oh, please don't do this to me. It looks like it's technology. Here we are. And so what we've got is 32 organizations were selected to undertake the baseline assessment as part of the targeted work. Up to this week, end of this week, I would have interviewed 19 organizations, or rather I have a conversation with 19 organizations to identify and to reflect on their self-assessment score and to identify an action plan arising from that. And of the 19 so far, what we're getting is a score of 2.6, which is the median. So that means that 50% are above it and 50% are below it as a marker. And at this point, they are construed or classified in our typology as a developing organization. And for those who've read the report, we've got 4 sort of like development phase, developing, and development, and highly and advanced. Then you've got the overall score, the all average score across all, and not just the median point, is 2.7, which again places them in a developing organization. And what's coming through is that more organizations are below the 3, the 3, which is the next stage up, than above it. So there's a large proportion of organization coming through who are deemed developing. And at this stage, the strongest domains that are being reflected are organization with strong asset ownership, whether it's long leases, or most of them are long leases, as opposed to outright ownership. The whole area of connectedness and engagement is again another strong feature of most of the organization, and probably not unsurprising. And the governance and leadership as is also bubbling. And I'll say something which is quite interesting. So that the strong 3 domains that's coming through, and the weakest 3 domains that we could see are around operations and infrastructure, and largely to do with CRM systems and reporting, technological opportunities, as well as staffing and that sort of thing. Financial resources, again, this reflects quite strongly on the questions around sustainability, and in particular questions around multi-year funding as opposed to project-based funding, and impact and effectiveness. And in this area, we're hearing quite a lot about reporting of impact and impact indicators and the likes. Prior to starting, organizations, in addition to the other questions they were asked to fill in on their expression of interest, was the question of ranking how they saw themselves then with regards to, and this was around February, March, how they saw themselves, how they saw their priority in terms of the 6 domains. And what you've got, if I read from the bottom, the area, and I won't go through all of them, but the area that organizations said they were in greatest need of, more organization than not, 34% outright had said financial resources as their top priority. 25% had indicated physical asset ownership. That's to secure it as well as to have extended lease. Some were having problems with local authorities. And so it's whether or not you could broker some of those conversations. And around a 3rd priority was around operations and infrastructure, jointly 3rd and 4th in terms of their ranking. And again, further down, you're getting impact and connectedness. It doesn't come up as a high priority at this stage, but when they started to do the self-assessment, those was almost reversed in a way. Financial resources remain, but impact and effectiveness and operations then rose to the top in terms of how they assessed when they started to look deeper. This gives you an overview as to that the 19 averaged across, and that 2.7 point where the average line is. And so you could see 2.4 operations and infrastructure, 2.5 financial resources, and of course impact and effectiveness. All of those are on the cusp, but above that average line, you've got connectedness and engagement, asset ownership, and governance and leadership. So this is the average of the 19 so far scored. We've still got another 13, I think, to do when they come in. If you're online, please submit. So some of the key things emerging, we had conversations around workshops and webinars and the value and how they could supplement the consultancy with these things, and find what we were seeing around operations and infrastructure is conversation around website design and updating. And the updating is largely around staffing, lack of staff, lack of human resources to maintain the websites as well as updating them. And then the recruitment of staff, especially around, job descriptions, HR related concerns, some of those coming through. Financial resources, those areas, something around movement away from over-reliance on grant aid, and a lot of conversation around diversification of income streams, exploring what else can we do other than being project funded. And again, most organizations had low level reserves, under 6 months in most cases. And impact and effectiveness, again, monitoring and evaluation systems, and I said linked to the CRM systems and impact reporting, and that's just presentation, communication, agenda, and the indicators of effectiveness and impact. What are they? And that exploration of those things. So these are some of the things that may or may not fit with the workshop possibilities, but they seem to be coming through as strong areas where transfer of skills and learning and aptitude may well be beneficial to workshop options, possibilities. And that's it. I hope that was 5 minutes, Phil.
Just a little bit over, but very well done, and thanks for keeping that concise, but very, very useful. And I think once we get the full sort of 32 in, I think we can publish a sort of a summary report, and again we can make that available to our community here. So I'm mindful that we've overrun a little bit. I've informed everyone that we should just overrun for a few more minutes. So I'm going to ask you all to do sort of your top tips, or lessons learned that you could share. So Karl can be last, and then I've just got a couple of announcements, and then I think I'm going to close for this evening. So I'm going to ask you, Yvonne, top tip, what lessons learned around sort of ownership aspects, the journey?
Yeah, I think, I wrote a few things down just to kind of reflect, but I think that, creating the vision within the organisation and really sticking to it, because it's a bumpy road. You're on a journey, and there'll be so many bumps, but I think keep the vision in mind and work towards that. And also, I think consortia and partnerships, although they can be tough, again, they can be bumpy, but I think it allowed you to bring together, the best from a number of organisations. And organisations can't do everything. And, owning an asset is not for the faint-hearted, I'd suggest. You've got to be pretty tough to keep going on that journey. So think about who you want to work in partnership with. So I've got other tips, but that's fine. That's all I want to say for now. Thank you.
Well, I think there's a book in there, Yvonne, but we won't talk about that now, right?
It's coming, don't worry, it's coming.
Yeah. Paloma?
To follow up on what Yvonne said, I think that at every step of the way, every process is an opportunity for kind of skills and wealth building. So from the very beginnings, the kind of design processes of visioning, right the way through to construction. So just asking everybody involved in your project, I guess if you are getting consultants involved, like architects, engineers, builders, what they can offer out in terms of learning opportunities for other people along the way, and then building a kind of program around that and getting your community involved.
Definitely. I think recognise it's a learning journey for yourself. I've been involved in a few capital projects, and everyone's been different, and I've learned something new being involved in it. Euphrasia, the community spotlight, over to you. Top tip or lessons learned?
Teamwork, connections. You have a lot of connections, and I've learned to value everybody, because some of the work of our renovations services are involved. Partners have lots of partners. So what I've learned so much is it's a teamwork. And never give up. Keep going. Sometimes as admin, we do not have privileges. Sometimes we're looked down upon, but never give up. And as a team, we can do much more than if you're the only person. If I look at Rhema House, it's so much of a team. People coming together, even during the hard times. We nearly lost one of our workers because of racism, but we never gave up. Now, when we see people having hot meals, having a space where they can come without even buying anything, we feel so excited and look forward to do more. All the challenges really become so small than the benefits.
I think also just taking an asset-based approach, you must have some incredible people walking in through the door who have a status as a refugee or an asylum seeker, but actually they have a life, they have experience and they have qualifications, and I'm sure they're able to bring so much in terms of their assets and knowledge and experience to you. Karl, over to you as the final kind of speaker contributor. Top tip, lessons learned, just generally or from what's coming through in the assessments?
I think for me, one of the things that's coming through very clearly is the approach that organizations actually are adopting. They're actually approaching it in my mind and from the conversations I've been having, with a need to really try to understand where they could make a difference. And where the support can make a difference, given that the enormity of what they've got to manage and grapple with, and knowing that there is a limited time, and so being able to focus down on what we would ask the consultant to do for them and with them could make a difference. And I think that has come through very strongly. And I think everyone I've spoken to so far have really looking forward to just homing in on one or two key areas, knowing that there's a limitation, but really focusing on the things that they can't do because of capacity issues.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So I'm going to say thank you to our speakers and contributors, and particularly Euphrasia from up in Stockton-on-Tees, who really given their time and some valuable sort of lessons and experience and knowledge of the work in this particular space. I just want to quickly just wrap up and just a few quick brief announcements. We are developing a community wealth building microsite. In there, we'll synthesize all the learning from Agbero. We'll provide accessible resources, case studies. We'll have to signpost you to different opportunities. We'll have videos. All of these recordings from Agbero Live will be on there. So it'll be a very useful resource, and that's going to be available to everyone that's joined the Agbero 2100 program. We're also in the process of establishing communities of practice around the country. So look out for information in the coming weeks about how to join a community of practice in your region. And I believe we've also posted a link to some cooperative practice, so some research around cooperative ownership of land and property. So if it's not been put in the chat, if we could put the link again in the chat, but of course we'll make the links available in the resources. So we have run over. This is the last in a series of 6. So now going forward, those 50 organisations that are in Agbero will be engaging with you around masterclasses and training, and of course the 32, you've already started receiving your assessments. So we'll start going forward with you in terms of the online sessions, training. We've got some very useful insights in terms of the types of topics that you'd like to see, and then we'll be able to, from September onwards, start assigning and allocating consultants to work with you on a range of issues, from impact measurement to leases to grade 2 listed buildings, community asset transfer, financial planning, and so on. So do stay in touch, do keep in touch, check in with us via the microsite when that goes live. But again, I just want to say thank you to our speakers, and I want to say particularly thank you to the audience. You're all still here. The same number from the beginning are still staying here to the very end. So thank you to all, and I look forward to seeing you in the coming weeks, months, and hopefully years. So thanks again. Good night.